And okay, we're recording. So this is our introductory to leadership class. If you're just joining us online, as far as watching this later on and not live, you're joining myself and the Beckers. So we're going to get in to what goes on this evening and the format. So we're going to look at the paperwork, then we're going to look at a few of the slides and go through that, and then how the evenings will be set up and what's it like to be in person and what's it like to be online, because we've learned to be able to do both and have them run at the same time, which is kind of different, but it does work. So the first thing I'm going to do is going to go ahead and present a window of mine. Just a moment, a window. What is that? And that's the leadership class syllabus. I hope that's the right one. Okay, so I'm going to pull this on up here. So you should be able to see this. So you will all be getting a 3-ring binder, which has our syllabus in there. You can see that there are 28 different lessons, and we're talking about everything to the introduction to leadership and goal setting, to being a giver, time management, because time management has a huge effect on what we're able to do and not able to do. So I think it's wise for us to be able to do that. The importance of prayers. We'll also be covering the basic disciplines of the Christian life. You'll see that on lesson 5. And so you'll hear me talking about that a lot. You hear me talk about a lot in church as well on Sundays. Everything down to confession of sin. Lesson number 16 is one night where we do not have men and women together. It is meeting the needs of your spouse. So with the men, I'll be talking about meeting the needs of your wife, and then with the women, I'll be meeting the needs of your husband. And typically we do that on 2 different nights. So one week, one person gets it off, and the other week, the other people get it off. We do talk about anger. That's a big one. Being able to control anger, and then gentleness and servant's heart. So quite the spectrum, some of it more theologically based, and some of it just kind of logic, like in the sense of like time management, setting goals, and how that is biblical, and then how to apply it, like learning from Nehemiah is one way. So so when you get it, it will look like this. Now, this is our old format, which is lecture format. And typically, I talk, you fill in the blanks. However, that is, while these blanks, you'll still have us to fill out the blanks, it's actually going to be done in discussion format. So with a lot of different questions. So just to give you an idea, oh, you can't see us. I was almost going to, actually, I don't know. Can you guys see me at all still?
No.
Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. And
now we can. Yep.
So I have, I don't know if you can see this, but I have questions written out on here. So I'll be still doing it with the fill in the blanks, but then I also have questions and stuff. So it'll be a little bit more discussion based.
Okay.
So that's what you'll be getting. You'll be getting a 3-ring binder with all this information in there. And you don't have to pay anything or anything like that. We just give that to you. The one thing that, and we'll also be doing let me pull these out real quick. I'll put them over here. The only thing that we do have these, but if you'd like to get your own, you can too. And that is we use good old-fashioned cards like this. And so these are for our memory verses. So we do memorization of scripture. Some people are like, I can't memorize anymore. And I usually tell them you can memorize. It just may be a lot harder than what you're used to doing. You haven't done it for a long time. So if you haven't done memorization since you were 18 years old and back in high school, it could be more work. So the mind is kind of like a memory or like a muscle. And so with prayer and practice, you get better at it, but it does take time. And so I'm just trying to find a card here. Yeah, I won't really show anymore. My writing's horrible, so I'm not gonna show those off. But some people will say, hey, you know what? I can't memorize the verses. I'm having a struggle with that. And what I'll tell them to do is to work on one verse a month. If that's all they get, it's one verse a month. By the end of the year, they will have 12 verses, which is typically much more than most people know before they even started. And as you get better at it, it gets easier because I know people who are in their 80s and 90s who have memorized far more verses than I have, and they have hundreds and hundreds just because they've been doing it for so many years. They've gotten better. So uh, we have cards, but if you want to pick some up at the drugstore or wherever, Dollar General, feel free to go and pick up one. And the way you do it is you fill out two different cards. You fill out one for yourself, or if you have another way you want to do it, like put on your cell phone, you could do that. And then you fill out one that you give to me. And so then what happens is on um, the leadership nights on Tuesday nights, I will go through people's cards and say, okay, hey, can somebody go ahead and tell me math, or, here's your card. Can you tell me Matthew 25:21? And then you guys will, and I'll try to help you through it, to help you get started, because most people will be like, I know that verse, I just can't remember it. And so if I have to help you out at every other word, I'm okay with doing that, just to help people, because it takes practice. So it is, again, for everybody's benefit, not to discourage people. So so yeah, like I said, if it's helping you with every other word works, then I'll do that. Does that sound okay so far?
Good.
Okay. I'm doing lecture format right now, but I don't know if I could do it any other way. So the normal evening will start off with everybody getting together, in person and online. So I'll give a chance for everybody to log in. I'll usually open it up a few minutes before class starts with Google Meet, and then everybody coming into the classroom, and usually we talk for a couple minutes. But we usually start right on the dot, like 6:02, maybe like the latest I try to go. And the main reason for that is because the class really does take 1 hour, and so I truly try to make sure that we fit and get done in 1 hour and be respectful of everybody's time. And so that's, I try to do that with the life groups in the same way, where I really try to meet it on time, just because I want to be respectful to everybody's schedules. And if people afterwards want to sit around and talk, that's fine. But if they need to go, they can. So when we meet usually upstairs in our current building. At the new building, we'll figure that out. I'll usually have a system up on stage where I'm sitting next to the TV, and then everybody just kind of sits in the front couple rows in the middle, and or even off to one of the sides, off to my left side, which would be if you're walking in the door, everybody's right. And that gives, let everybody just kind of set up, get comfortable. And then usually in front of me or off to the side of me, I'll have the computer screen with the camera in front of me. And so that way I can talk, and those who are on the camera can see me clearly and hear me clearly, and those live with me can see. And there's the TV right behind me, so everybody can see that as well. So I find that to be very useful. So everybody comes in, and then for the first 10 to 15 minutes, maybe as long as 20, we will have accountability time. So everybody kind of gets together, partners together, usually with the same sex, so men and men, women and women, and they'll ask questions like, hey, how you doing with reading through the Bible? Hey, how'd you do with your memory verse this week? Why don't you go and tell me? I'll recite my memory verse, you go and recite the memory verse, and we'll help each other out. Where are you in your reading? So it just kind of gives some time for people to kind of talk. At first, it tends to be very structured, like everybody's going through their list of like, how did you do on the memory verse? How did you do with the Bible reading? How did you do with this, and this? But as time goes on, we find that people just kind of morph as they get to know each other more. Be like, hey, tell me what's going on with your sister. How did things go last week with this and that? And that's okay. We want people to hold each other accountable, and we want people to be talking about relational and real things as they get more comfortable. Now, for the people who are online, depending on who's online, So typically, like if which I may have a more of an issue because I realize I might have. Usually, I only have one sex online, and so usually I have like the guys talk to the person who's online, and but this time we may end up having both men and women online. So I may end up doing online with the online people. After that, um, we just kind of jump right on into the lesson for the evening. So as far as introduction, do you have any questions or anything like that?
Nope. Sounds pretty good.
Okay,
Sounds good.
it's straightforward. After that, we'll jump right into the presentation. So I'm going to go and present that real quick. Let me turn that on. Present a window. Yeah. So I use good old-fashioned PowerPoint. So, intro to leadership. I'll start with that. And then I'll talk about it. I'll ask some questions, or actually this one I'll just go ahead and just do right off the bat. And that is everything rises and falls on leadership. And so you would have your book, you would fill that out. Everything rises and falls on leadership. You will hear me say this over and over and over. And so the question then would be, okay, if everything rises and falls on leadership, how would you explain that? How would you interpret that sentence? So I'm going to ask you guys, how would you interpret that sentence right now? What are your thoughts or feelings on that?
Okay. Good leadership elevates people, and bad leadership makes people stumble.
Hey, that is a great definition. In fact, I'm trying to find my pencil. I really like that. I am going to steal that from you. Thank you. You just made my life easier. So, and I don't have a good pencil with me. My goodness. I'm digging through my desk trying to find one. Okay. So, good. What was good? What does what?
Good leadership elevates people. Bad leadership causes people to stumble.
I like that contrast. So,
Thanks.
Yep. Thank you. That's going to be added in future days. So you'll hear me probably quote that as well. So, and I think that's very accurate. As far as the church, where the church goes, how it goes, it really is dependent upon what the leadership does. Not just my leadership, but also the leadership of the elders. That has a huge impact or they have a huge impact. But then on the other leaders within their ministry leaders, how they lead as well determines how well the church is, how well it does, and how physically healthy it is as well. So my desire is to build up leaders because I want healthy spiritual leaders. So sometimes people come to me and say, hey, you know what? I like to start this one ministry. And my question is, well, have you done a leadership class? Because if somebody's done a leadership class and I know they're spiritually healthy, then I feel encouraged that I could go and enhance something off to them. And and I'll feel better about that. But if it's not somebody I really know where they are spiritually, then I'm a little bit more hesitant. So, how do you think you get to be a leader for God, and how do you think you get to become a leader in other people's lives? What would you say is the biggest factor there? What's the requirements? Maybe that's the word.
I think a willingness to serve and a humility.
Yeah, that's good. So, and I think that'll lead to this. I think that's goes and complements this, and that is all leadership is earned from God and from the people we are leading. And I think what you're talking about is that willingness to serve and that humility. That is part of the process that earns it. God is looking for the humble. In fact, Scripture tells us God is for the humble, but He is against the proud. And so, if you want leadership, if you are humble, then God's going to use that. If you are a servant, then God can use you. And those are the two factors that people are looking at. If you're a proud, arrogant person, then we tend to be more resistant. But if we know that you're willing to serve us and lead us, and you care about us, then yeah, humbleness, serving, that's going to let us allow people to lead because we know they have our best interest. So that is great. So then I'm going to go right into number 3 here, and you can kind of see how this works.
Yeah.
The biggest mistake people make is to assume that they have leadership because of position or title. And yeah, so why doesn't position guarantee leadership?
Well, you can have any title, but still be faking your way through it and not have obedience to God.
Yes, yeah, that's good. I think people sometimes assume, well, I'm an elder, so therefore you have to follow me. But if they haven't earned it, haven't earned the trust, or have done exactly the opposite, burned their bridges, then people don't want to follow, because they don't trust you. You're not humble. You're not a servant. You're an arrogant, bossy person who just has their own agenda planned out for themselves. I find that sometimes when people get into churches and they plug in, they get into leadership positions too soon. And so they haven't earned the respect from others yet. And so they think because they have a position that they therefore should be able to boss people around. And that's often where it creates conflict. So conflict often happens when people have not earned the position to be able to lead others. Now, in a business, you have a position. That doesn't mean you are a leader, but you have a position. And if somebody's not doing what you want and you're the owner of a business, what can you do to employees to make sure that they can comply?
Repeat that again.
Yeah, can you say that again, please?
No problem. If you have a business and you want your employees to comply, what is something that you could do to make sure that they do what you say?
Training is pretty important.
Okay,
Training. I
good.
think they've got to trust you first, and you've got to walk your talk.
But if you're a business owner though, do you have to? I mean, can you be a bad business owner and still be in charge of people?
Oh yeah, you can still be in charge. Doesn't mean you're in charge well.
Yeah, it means you're a horrible person to lead. But see, that's a position. That's not necessarily a leader. That's a position, and they have a stick, and that stick is, I could fire you. I pay you. Do what I
Right.
say because I'm paying you. And so they're using a stick. In a church, in my position, we don't have a stick. And so my desire is to earn that position of being a leader. So that's the difference between a leader and people, and in your life, the people that you are leading, you don't necessarily have a position. You could be somebody without position and yet still be a leader in their life, even though you're not a CEO. You're not somebody famous. Bob Blanke in our church is a great example. He's just a man who goes to our church, and yet he's a very strong leader for many of our men who go to our church. So, the difference between position and leadership. Husbands often need to learn this because they believe, well, I got the position of husband, or I got the position of father, so you should do what I say. However, I know that when I've tried that, I usually will run into a rebellion with my kids if I'm just being a turd.
Yeah.
So, big difference between position and power. And so this is going to be the last question I ask here. Why do you need, what do you need to have to be, what do you, let me try again. What do you need to have to be a leader? That's really, really poor grammar. I'm going to need to rewrite that question. So what do you need in order to become a leader?
Influence sometimes, good influence, hopefully.
That is perfect. In fact, I'm going to hit on that, and we will actually even talk about influence. So look at this. The key to leadership is authority. There is no leadership without authority, and that is influence. In fact, we will talk about influence directly later on, and we use that as a key word. So the key to leadership is authority. There is no leadership without authority. And then, so and I would go on from there. I'm not going to go any farther tonight. It kind of just gives you an idea of what we're looking at here. So I'm going to stop sharing here. And so that kind of gives you an idea of what we'd be doing. So trying to make a discussion format, and then, but leave you with something like an outline to fill out so you have something to review. So
Sounds
then,
good.
what do you do after this? Well, we give you a verse, and in your booklet, you would have a page that shows all the different verses. So I'm just showing you my 3-ring binder. And then right around the last page, it shows the memory verses we would go over. And it's like I said, some people may be farther ahead doing 1 verse a week. Some people might be doing 1 verse a month, and that's okay. And so we ask people to start working on a memory verse right away. In fact, I'll go and get, well, you'll get 2 weeks, but I'll go and give you the advanced knowledge of what the first verse is. And it is, I'm going to let you know right off the bat, it is considered one of the hardest ones. But if you get past the hardest one, then everything after this is easy. So that's why we do it this way. And you'll have 2 weeks notice to work on it. It's Ezekiel 22, verses 30 through 31. And has a fantastic verse. I was very impressed because I was in Bible study with Joe Mala this last week at Bob Lundy's house, and she actually quoted the verse, and I was just amazed because I was like, "We haven't taken that class like in 3 years, and you memorize that verse." He didn't have the address right, and so she felt bad that she didn't have the address. I was like, "You quoted the whole verse. It's okay to have the address. Okay, I'm impressed." So she's like, everybody else probably knew. I'm like, no, nobody else even remembered the verse. You're the only one who had it totally down. So I was ecstatic to hear that. But it's a great verse. I'll explain the verse in detail, in more detail, what's going on next week. And then the other thing we have you do is you will get 2 copies of the notes. You'll get 1 copy that is that you keep in your 3-ring binder that you fill out. And then you get another copy that is just independent. If you wanted to put in a 3-ring binder, or if you want like those little tabs, I forget they call where you yellow like tabs you stick in there and open up to keep them together. You can do that. That is your quiz. So what you do is you go home, you read over the notes that you took, and then before we meet the next time, you sit down for 10 minutes and you test yourself. How much do you remember? And so what that causes is it causes you to continue to read over the notes over the course of the week. Because what happens often, and you'll see this on Sunday, I'll say, okay, what did I talk about last Sunday? And people will be like, I don't know. I remember there's a story that I liked. I'm like, okay, cool. Okay, what did I talk about 2 weeks ago? And like, I have no clue. So what this does is reinforces the information. You're testing yourself. And for the guys, we actually score. So if the guys say, we do it from 100. You say every test is worth at least 100. And if you get them all right, then you got 100. But if you got 5 wrong, then you get a 95. If you got 10 wrong, then you get a 90. If you get them all wrong, well, you're not going to go down to 0. You'll still be at 50. So some people try to figure out percentage-wise. I'm like, no, just say I got 3 wrong. And if you got, so for example, let me pull it back up here real quick. A window. Here we go. If you happen to say the key to leadership is influence, and there is no leadership without authority. So you got one of the words wrong, right? You don't count it all wrong. You only count that one word that you got wrong. So, yes, the other ones are still correct. Sometimes people are like, oh, if you don't have 100% perfect, it's not good. Or let's say if you write down the key to leadership is, and you can't quite remember the word authority, but you say, no, I'm trying to think of another word. Actually, I like influence. The key to leadership is influence. There is no leadership without influence. If it's the same general basic concept, give yourself some grace. I mean, this is a guide, not a God. So don't be like, hey, the word has to be exactly right. If the word was supposed to be good and you wrote great, it's okay. It's a concept.
Okay.
Not having it down exactly. So grace is good. So you test yourself, you do the memory verse, and those are the first two things we start with. We do slowly add some other things like prayer and stuff like that, but those come in time. So we try to adjust you in and move you in slowly. We don't try to kill you all at once. So it's not a sink or swim situation. So I think that covers pretty much everything. And then the next week when we get together, the men, they tally up their scores. They kind of hold each other accountable with their scores, and they can see how well they're doing. It just that challenge is kind of good for men to be a little bit competitive. And for the women, I do not do that. I discovered that women don't necessarily want to be competitive. My wife is one of them. She loves being competitive, but that's not typical for most women. So we let them just talk and work through it. But guys like to be competitive. Women generally not so. I don't know about you. Are you competitive?
Yes, Kevin, no.
You have to ask my wife that.
That's funny. So you should have done this class with my wife, because she was like, I wanted the points. So she was a one kid. So she's like, I want to score. Yeah. That's too funny. But you could keep score if you wanted to. I'll let you compete.
Okay.
Yeah, and it also depends on every group. So every group's slightly different. Okay, well, that covers how this class is set up. I think I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and then I'll give you guys just a chance to ask any questions. In fact, actually, I should ask that now. Is there any thoughts or any questions about any of this?
No, you're very well presented.
Just curious
Okay.
to see what it's all about.
Yeah.
Look forward to it.
All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. And if you're watching the recording later on, if you have any questions, feel free to email me or give me a call. My cell phone number is 541-375-0019. Again, 541-375-0019. You can also find my phone number on the back of any of the bulletins. So if you have an old bulletin, pull that out. And then you can email me. You can find that on our website at millcitycc.com. The CC stands for Christian Church. So you can email me at paul@millcitycc.com. Stop the recording. Bye.